Hello and welcome to Mr. C History. Now you join me in the graveyard of St Mary the Virgin Church in Mortlake in West London. And I'm here to just sort of prove a little observation that I've thought of recently. Now in America, all the graves of presidents of the United States, they're on a hugely grand scale with flags and with Italianate, almost Romanesque buildings, huge gardens, grand memorials. But in Britain, how do we treat our former political leaders, the graves of all our prime ministers? Well, from my observation, we don't treat them very well. They're often hidden. They're tiny, small scales, small little graves or something like that, hidden away, church around the corner. And so to prove that point, I'm going to go around today and have a look at various different sites of some really significant political leaders, some less so, but still prime ministers, to see how they're memorialised in death, their graves. Now we're going to start here because I'm actually going to look for a prime minister called Henry Addington, and actually it's proving so hard. I don't actually quite know where he is. There is a little guide, a map, which in itself is pretty neglected, so we're going to have to have a little hunt around now to see what I can find. Now I think I might have found certainly one of the main contenders. On the map this says this is the tomb to the family Sidmouth, the surname of the Prime Minister Henry Addington. Now this is the main contender here, what it says. There is a rather grander one on here, but this doesn't correspond with the map. But the problem is, both of them, I can't read any of the writing on it. It's totally faded out. This definitely is a forgotten Prime Minister, and actually not surprising. He was only Prime Minister for 3 years, 1801 to 1804, and he was sandwiched between William Pitt the Younger, very famous dueling Prime Minister of the turn of the 18th and 19th century. So probably understandable why he's forgotten. He didn't really do much. He had a little brief peace in the Napoleonic Wars and tried to do some economic reforms, which were all brushed over when Pitt came back in again. So totally forgotten really in life, and definitely forgotten here in death. But I think this definitely proves my point of how we don't celebrate our prime ministers at all. I'm in Stanmore, in Middlesex, at the end of the Jubilee line, and I'm in the ruins of St John the Evangelist Church. There is the new church over there, built in the 1850s. This is the old one that was built in the 1600s. And just in the corner there is a sort of yellowing, mouldy plaque to a very forgotten Prime Minister, the Earl of Aberdeen. No, me neither. And I think mainly he's forgotten because he was actually a pretty terrible Prime Minister. 1852 to 1856, important time. Britain was at war, specifically the Crimean War, but it is his handling of the Crimean War where he gets a lot of criticisms. He was trying to lead a coalition government full of Whigs and Peelites and radicals, but every decision he wanted consensus, he wanted to discuss, and he was very indecisive. So there's a recipe for disaster there. Leading a war, refusing to make a decision, commanding a coalition government that can't make a decision. It's going to be bad, isn't it? And it's the perfect metaphor, isn't it? His plaque there, forgotten in this ruined church forevermore. This is the church of St Michael on the Hughenden estate, just outside High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire. And this grave behind me, believe it or not, is the grave to one of the most significant British Prime Ministers ever. Certainly one of the most significant of the 19th century, Benjamin Disraeli. Why so significant? Well, he presided over a time when the British Empire exploded in influence, in size, in power. You can think what you want about the British Empire, whether it was good or bad. It was certainly significant, and he played a big key part in that. Why? Well, one of the key things, of course, he did is he bought the Suez Canal off the Egyptians, and Britain was able to control the Suez Canal for a long time after that. And control of the Suez Canal meant control of global trade, which meant the most powerful nation on earth. It wasn't just foreign affairs though. Second Reform Act, that was in his first term as Prime Minister, doubled the vote, doubled the franchise. And because lots of these people had new to vote, so the poorer population, he brought in policies that would help them. Better housing, better education, for example. He is, of course, very famous for his rivalry with William Gladstone, remember from the Liverpool video. And it was these two amazing statesmen with amazing oratory dominating the Houses of Parliament, pushing forward and consolidating that power in the office of British Prime Minister. So Prime Ministers of today have a lot to owe Benjamin Disraeli. Maybe he's got a bit more than some of the ones we've seen so far, but nothing compared to many of those 19th century US presidents who were less significant than him. So I'm sorry about that, Dizzy. This is the All Saints Parish Church right in the middle of High Wycombe. And inside there is a memorial and a grave to a pretty much unknown Prime Minister of the 18th century, the Earl of Shelburn, William Petty. He was Prime Minister for just a year, 1782 to 1783, but he signed a very significant document. He signed the Treaty of Paris of 1783, which effectively ended the American Revolutionary War. And it was where Britain, he as the British Prime Minister, ceded control of huge territories way up to the Mississippi and down to Florida, up to Canada, to the newly formed American government. He said, yes, British troops will end, the war is over, we are no longer fighting you. Essentially, he recognized the independent state of America. America was now free. It was Shelburne who signed that document and signed it off. This is significant for several reasons. One, it creates the United States as it's a birth of a nation, this independent state. The French got a whiff of it. Some of the revolutionaries in France thought, maybe we could have something similar. Maybe we can break off the shackles. It also meant that America was now a player on the international stage, was recognized, it could make its own treaties, it could become the most powerful nation on earth. So, Lord Shelburne, did he play a major role in creating the United States of America? This is the Church of St. Peter in Burnham, Berkshire, just outside Slough. And somewhere in this graveyard is buried William Lord Grenville. Now I say somewhere because his grave has been lost. Yes, the Prime Minister of Britain, their grave has been lost. There is a memorial plaque to him within there. Now he was only Prime Minister for a year and he might be forgotten, but it's rather extraordinary. He did preside over some significant things. Specifically also, he was Foreign Secretary in the 1780s during the French Revolution. He'd have seen all the shenanigans going on there and would have dealt with many of the key players within the French Revolution. He became Prime Minister in 1806 after the death of William Pitt the Younger, so maybe he's overshadowed by that a bit. And he went on to being Prime Minister for just 1 year until 1807. Now those keen fans of history and those who will have watched my video on the abolition of slavery will remember 1807 is the year of the abolition of slave trade. Yes, Lord Grenville was the Prime Minister, he was keen on abolition, he was the Prime Minister that signed and put into law the abolition of slavery. An amazing achievement, an amazing figure who should be celebrated, yet his grave is missing. This is St. Luke's Church in Charlton in South East London, and buried here is Prime Minister Spencerpille, famous of course for being the only Prime Minister to be assassinated in 1812. Now probably that's all he's really remembered for, and if he wasn't assassinated he probably might have been remembered for being a pretty terrible Prime Minister. He was very famous for being very conservative fiscal policies, not a bit of a spendthrift, very vehemently anti-Catholic emancipation, not so keen on the abolition of slavery, and indeed he pursued some aggressive economic policies towards America that essentially led to the war in 1812 with America, so not a very good Prime Minister. But his fame comes from being assassinated. The details of his assassination are quite interesting. He was assassinated by a man called Bellingham, who by all intents and purposes actually wanted to assassinate the Foreign Secretary, not the Prime Minister. A bit of a case of mistaken identity, shock horror. He was assassinated in the lobby of the Houses of Parliament, right by the entrance to the House of Commons. Amazing. Imagine that couldn't happen today. What was Bellingham's motive? Well, I don't think he was very sound of mind, but he'd been a merchant and he'd been arrested and imprisoned in Russia for 5 years by the Russian Tsar, and he felt really aggrieved by this. He felt he had lost a lot of money. He could no longer be the merchant because he was stuck in prison, and he blamed the British government for not getting him out quick enough, and he was saying, can I please have some compensation? He'd written them letters, they'd been ignored, so he goes to Parliament and he shoots dead the Prime Minister. But anyway, Percival's buried in there. They don't know, his grave is somewhere under the crypt, apparently somewhere in there. Don't know quite where it is. So he's just got a plaque with some very loquacious text and a little bust of him there. Through these railings, on the ground over there, is a plaque to Margaret Thatcher. Indeed, there's this hospital, the Royal Chelsea Hospital, where the Chelsea pensioners are. This is the Margaret Thatcher Infirmary here. because this is where her ashes were scattered when she died in 2013. You can't actually really get access to it. You can arrange a tour, I think, perhaps if you wanted to, but the normal punter, no, can't quite get through. Well, how can we summarise Margaret Thatcher's time as Prime Minister? Well, from 1979 to 1980, won 3 elections quite convincingly. She has people who praise her and worship her almost, to people who really do vilify her. What were the key parts of her time? Well, obviously taking on the unions that she felt was important, privatisation of lots of industries from British Gas, British Airways to the coal mines, etc. Falklands War, of course, 1982, she fought and won that. She certainly adopted a strong leadership. And of course the Cold War, a key Cold War leader taking on Gorbachev and the Soviet Union. And actually there's a good stark contrast with the president at the time of the United States, Ronald Reagan. His grave is huge with flags and mausoleums and a presidential library, etc. She's rather forgotten here, sort of by the bus stop. Well, there you go. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and hopefully I really proved my point about how we remember our British Prime Ministers. There are others that I could definitely have a look at, and maybe one day I will. But for now, thank you ever so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.